All right then, so now all we have to do is to go ahead and initialize the Prisma and the Postgres Neon DB, which we are going to use for storing the user information and along with the inquiries for this particular project. Okay, so let's go ahead and initialize that. So in this case, I'm going to close all. Okay, then clear all these things. Then I'm just going to say pnpm add Prisma and at Prisma slash client. Hit the enter. So this is going to download the Prisma and the Prisma client. All right, so now all I have to say pnpm Prisma init. So now you can see it is initialized and it generates the database URL. If you check it out in the env file, you can see it is automatically generated the Prisma URL. Okay, which in case we don't have this URL, we need to change it over here. Close this. And inside the Prisma, we do have the schema, and which is currently it's using the PostgreSQL. Okay, so I need to stop the server because we made some changes in the environment variable. And now all I have to do is to search for neon db. Search for neon db. So click this neon serverless Postgres database. Click this. Okay, so in this case, now I'm going to create a new project, and which is going to be ourselves the PM Gold Finance. Okay, so choose the databases as service provider as per your wish. I'm going to keep it as it is and then click create project. There we go. In this case, I'm going to use this Next.js, and you can see they provided the env, the database URL as well as, and you can give they provided you the action script. Okay, so all I have to do is to get back over here in the Prisma and click this env, and I'm going to copy this everything from here. Copy it, open the env file, and then delete this, paste it. So if you're using less than the version number, if it is less than 5.10, then you need to uncomment this line. Otherwise, you can leave it as it is. Okay, so save it. Let's get back to the Prisma over here. And in the schema, inside the schema, we don't have to do anything else. Just leave it as it is. Unless if you are using less than the Prisma version is if less than is 5.1, you need to use this. Okay. In this case, I'm going to leave it as it is. So let's go ahead and create the model for our user now. So that is what we are going to do now. So first, let's go ahead and create that model for the user. So model user, open it. So inside here, now what we need to do is we need to define all those structures and everything. So first we need to have the ID, which in case it's going to be the init, and by default itself it's going to be auto generated, so auto increment. Then okay, okay, don't worry, so we will fix that. Then this, okay, the issue is it is going to be the ID one. Yes, that's the thing. So since it is, we need to map it with the proper ID, because the by default itself the Postgres table, it generates the ID. So we need to map that ID with the default auto increment value. That's the issue. Okay. Then I need to generate the user ID, which is provided by the clerk itself. So I'm going to keep it as the string. Okay. Otherwise, what we can do, instead of user ID, I can keep it as the clerk ID. Okay. Then I need to get the full name of the user, full name, which is in case it's going to be string. Then I need to get the email, that is also string. Then I need to get the profile image of that user. So let's keep it as the image URL, image underscore URL, which is going to be string. Okay, I think these are the fields which I needed from the authenticated user: full name, email, image URL, clerk ID. I think nothing else. Then I need to get the created at, which in case it's going to when the user is successfully created. So let's say created at, which in case it's going to be date time, and it needs to be automatically generated at default now. Okay, then I need to create a unique field at unique field. So the clerk ID needs to be unique. We need to make sure the clerk ID needs to be unique. Then for the inquiry, so model inquiry I need to define the ID, which in case it's going to be ID at default auto increment. Then I need to get I need to map the relationship which user created that what okay, so here user ID, we need to map the user ID, which in case it's going to be integer itself, int. And then we need to get the by the authenticated user informations itself, we can display the first name and last name. Then I need to get the type, a loan type, what type of the loan it is. Then amount, what is the expected amount that user is it's expecting. Then the message, what exact message that he is typing. Then right after here, I need to get the created at when this message it's being created by the user. Then I need to map it with the user at relation. I need to create the relation fields, which is going to be the user ID, and then the reference, which is going to be the ID field. Either you can map it with the ID or you can map it with the clerk ID, because that is the unique property we defined. So in this case, I'm going to define it with the ID itself, and I need to create the relationship over here as well as, so let's say user, which is going to be the user array. Oops, not user, this is going to be the inquiry and inquiry array. Save it. So now we have that the necessary table relationship. So we have the user and the single and an inquiry. So a single user can have multiple inquiries. That's the reason we have the multiple array inquiry. But for a single inquiry, it should have only one user ID. So that's the reason we have only one user relationship for this table. So we successfully created this. Now PNPM Prisma generate. We need to generate it. So the client needs to be generated. Then PNPM Prisma migrate dev. So hit the enter. So this will create the migration. So it will take some time for the very first migration setup, right? But we need to do the proper migrations, because maybe in the future, if you're facing any technical issues with your database, we can roll back to the previous migration step. So that's the reason every time when you push some changes into a database, migrating it will help you to really it's really helpful. Okay, so it's taking some time, so let's wait. I don't know why it's taking this much time. Okay, so now it's asking the migration name. In this case, I'm just going to say initialize the DB. So hit the enter and let's wait. All right then, so it's finally done. Okay, so it took me 30 seconds to create that. Then I need to push these changes into that. So clear, then PNPM Prisma DB push all these changes into the database. So that is going to create these necessary table into our database. So let's wait until it's successfully pushed. Yep, now it's done, and now all I have to do is to click these tables over here, and you should be able to see the migration. Prisma migration, which is we did, you can see. Then we have the user table, and then we have the inquiry table, right? So we have the necessary changes which we needed it. So now all I have to do is to, every time whenever the user is successfully authenticated himself, it needs to create a new what to say, a new user data into our user table. It should happen automatically. So in order to do that, I need to install this very specific package called unton, right? So because we are going to create ourselves a JWT token to trigger an API to do that stuff. So all I have to do is to copy this, copy it. Then I'm just going to say npm add unton. Okay, then I'm just going to, please make sure that your local host is keep on running. So I'm just going to say npm run dev. The local host needs to run. Then in a new tab, I'm just going to make sure to run this tunnel. So I'm going to copy this, then I'm going to paste it. So this is going to create a new tunnel for that particular, it's going to give us a temporary URL. Once the project has been successfully deployed, we need to give that updated URL into that JWT token. Right now we need a tunnel, right? So the tunnel provides us an external URL to map those to trigger that API in order to save this user informations into our database. So let me show you. Instead of talking, let me show you. So I need to say yes. So it's waiting for the tunnel URL. So let's wait. Okay, so now it's just created ourselves one tunnel over here. Let's wait. So for the very first time, it will take some time. Okay, so now the tunnel is ready. Let me run this code one more time. So it's starting the Cloudflare tunnel for this particular. So it's waiting for the tunnel. And this is the one, this is the tunnel which is generated by the Cloudflare. So I'm going to copy this, copy. So keep it running, don't close anything else. Then I just need to get back into the Clerk. I'm going to open the Clerk. I need to get into the dashboard. And that will take us into the application, and inside that application I'm going to click the configure, and here I can get into the webhooks. All right, so here I just need to add an API endpoint, so paste it. Right after here I'm just going to say API slash clerk slash webhook. That's the API endpoint that we are currently using. Later, once the project has been successfully deployed, I need to supply the deployed URL over here, right? So here I'm just going to choose the user. Whenever a new user is created, deleted, or updated, this API needs to be triggered so that I can collect that updated information and I can put it into the our database. So I'm just going to create. Okay, so now we need to do the testing. Okay, so let's say event type, let's say user created. So this is the object that is going to be carried out. So now if I click send the example, see, it's failed. The reason is because we don't have any API endpoints, nothing is inside our, see, it's saying it's triggering that API slash clerk webhook. This webhook is being triggered, but we don't have that API. So now all I have to do is to get back over here inside the app folder. I'm going to create a new folder called API, and inside the API folder, I'm going to create a new folder called clerk, and inside the clerk, I'm going to create a new folder called webhook. And inside this, I'm going to create a new file called route.ts. I need to create a post route over here. And that is what I'm going to do now. So here, I'm just going to say export const post is equals to asynchronous open it, and inside here I'm going to get the request, which is the type, and here I'm going to get the try and catch. So if there is any issues happening, all I have to do is to return next response from the Next.js server. I'm going to return a JSON. I'm going to get the message object, which is going to be error occurred. Then I'm going to return the error. Whatever the error is, I'm going to get that error and convert it into an error instance. Then I'm going to get that message, and I'm going to send it. Then right after that, along with that, I need to send the status code, which is going to be the 500. Okay, then I'm just going to get the data, like for instance, I'm going to get the data, await, from the request I'm going to access the JSON data, and then I'm just going to say console.log that data. Right, so let's make sure whether this is working fine. If everything is working fine, I should get that this log over here. Now if I hit the send example, see, we are getting that log statement over here. This is the sample data which we triggered from that API webhook. So the API webhook is working perfectly. Now all I have to do is to access this data information and put it into our database. So in order to do that, all I have to do is to create a database instance. So inside the library, I'm going to create this db.ts file. So if you open a new tab and search for Prisma docs and click the documentation, and click the get started. Okay, so here where it is, quick start, guides. If I click the guides, I think search for best practice. Search for best practice. You should be able to see this one. This is how we need to create the instance for the Prisma in the production, in order to avoid creating the instance for multiple times. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it over here. Right, so instead of this as a Prisma instance, I'm going to name it as the DB instance over here and here. So save it. Okay, so this is the best practice which is provided by the Prisma itself. So please go ahead and copy that. Okay, now I do have this database instance over here. Okay, now I can access that database instance. So let me get back into the route. Instead of doing the console.log over here, I'm going to generate the user data, which is going to be an object. So what are the things that we need? We need the full name, right? So full name, where it is, copy this full name. So full name, which in case it's going to be, if the data dot full name, where it is, first name, last name. Okay, I think it doesn't have the full name. Then it's better to join the first name and last name. That would be the proper way. So we can join the first name and last name just like that. Then I need to access the email address. So if you check it out over here, they do have the email address array. Inside that, they do have this email address. So we can access that email address from the 0th index. I can access the email address. Then I need to access the image URL, right? So I can get the image URL, data.image URL. Then right after here, what we do have, which is the clerk ID, that is nothing but your data.id. That's the clerk ID. So now we have the user data, right? So now all I have to do is to create this data into, save this data into our database. So in order to do that, I'm just going to say const user response is equals to user response is equals to await db. Let's access the db dot form, sorry, user. Let's choose the user database, user table. I'm going to create a new user using the create function and supply the instance. I need to supply the data, which in case it's going to be the user data, right? User data. So save this changes. Then if there is any error, if I don't have this user response, if there is anything is happened, then I'm just going to trigger this. Instead of that, I'm gonna show the error message as something happened, something went wrong, try again later. Otherwise, we can simply raise a new error, simply just like this, throw new error, something went wrong. So that is going to raise that error, so which is going to be passed over here, right? So otherwise, I'm just going to return next response.json, open it. I'm going to send the message as user created. Then I'm going to send the ID, user ID, which is being successfully generated, user response dot ID. Let's apply that clerk ID. Okay. If everything is properly created, we are sending the user ID as the user clerk response dot clerk ID. So let's save these changes. And now let me get back over here, refresh this. So now if I click the send, and if I check it out, so we are getting the status as 200. The reason is because it is successfully executed. See, it succeeded. A new user is created. Now if I get back over here and if I click the user, if I refresh this database, I should be able to see a new user. It's successfully created over here. See, user ID. So I don't need this user. I can simply delete this record. I don't need it. So now let's make sure everything is working perfectly fine. I'm just going to log out and let me get into the clerk users because I need to delete this user. Let me delete this user, delete. Now there is no user. Okay. So now all I have to do is to click over here, continue with Google, choose this account, continue, and it's asking the mobile number. So let me supply the mobile number and verify it with the OTP. I need to supply the OTP. Give me a minute. So I need to supply 773837. So the OTP is successfully verified. So the new user is successfully created. So we got that webhook. It's been triggered properly. And if you check it out over here, refresh this database, you should get that data. See, a new data has been successfully created with Ravi email address and the image URL. So which means we successfully created the a webhook for our clerk in order to trigger the hook automatically every time whenever the new user has been successfully created. We need to save the user data successfully into our database, which we did, and it's working perfectly fine, right? So now we have that working functionality perfectly. So all I have to do is to say changes clerk webhook created and user data saved to DB. commit. All right, so let's move on to the next section.